just want this to be easier. This shouldn't be so hard. So I messed up my shoulder at a race this weekend, and normally I am on rollers and Zwifting with my power meter. I use the Cycleops power meter. Well, rollers are not going to work with my shoulder. So last night I went out and bought a Smart Trainer. This will be my first time with a Smart Trainer. Stuck with the Wisconsin Cyclops brand, and there's sort of two versions of Smart Trainers. There's not so bad and wow, that's a lot of money. I got the not so bad version. This should be able to control the terrain automatically for me when I'm Zwifting, and it also delivers power. Demo unit off the floor from my local shop. Thank you, Recyclist, because I thought putting one together with one arm is not a great idea. Okay, they seem to have everything assembled. Skip all that. Let's see if we got a skewer in here. Some plugs. In this process, I am desperately looking for the app or some way to update the firmware, and it is painfully not obvious on how to accomplish that. Man, I wish that was more clear. I really struggled to find the right app. Well, the Bluetooth is two things. This has AMP Plus and Bluetooth, electromagnetic resistance. Okay, back to trying to update this firmware problem. And in the end, what you really need to do is download a third-party app called Rouvy, R-O-U-V-Y. That will allow you to calibrate the Magnus Trainer as well as update the firmware from that one app. Doesn't really matter what I think, does it? 10 minutes. 10 minutes. Does anyone know how to see the descriptions from this screen? Alright, well I guess I'm going to kit up and see what happens. Well, I'm going to have to do some research to figure out this calibration process. Frustrating. So the power went out a little while ago, and I discovered, sorry for the light, it's very difficult to do online indoor training when you have no power. So I thought, what else could I do? Well, I use this time maybe to improve my setup for the Zwift. So I'm going to build a little table that goes over the front wheel, and I'm cheap, so I'm trying to do that with some stuff I already had laying around. We'll see if it works. This is my new little Zwifting setup. I have the front wheel sort of jacked up a little bit. I'll be able to reach the laptop. I might be able to put a second fan on the shelf so I can control that. Yeah, that's slick. That's going to work out well. I might be able to even put some hooks or something in those holes to hang some more stuff out there. So, cool. Power came back on. Woohoo! Now you can see my setup here with a little more light. It's not bad. I'm happy with that. Mostly I'm happy with how much it costs. Not much. For 2 minutes now. This just feels so hard. And I'm in a really easy gear. I just want this to be easier. This shouldn't be so hard. So my problem now is I'm going up this hill, and I felt for the first time this process of the trainer sticking. And holy cow, that's excessive would be the word I would use. So I'm on a 7% grade right now. I mean, I guess that's somewhat realistic. It just is such a violent affair, I guess, from flat to distressed. And anyway, I'm out of gears because I can't really figure out how to calibrate this thing to work in a different spot. You know what I mean? Does that make sense?
Now I've finally given up. I'm calling Cycleops and I'm getting some help. And they've been very helpful. He pointed out the problem of trying to use Bluetooth through the Mac laptop, and by the time it was all said and done, I either need to use an iPad or an iPhone in order to do that, or I need to switch back to ANT+. So for a little while I thought, well, I'll just use the iPad, no big deal. But then I figured out that my heart rate won't work through the iPad because my heart rate is not Bluetooth. So back to ANT+ for everything, back to using the laptop, which is absolutely just fine. But that was the key secret I was missing in this hours-long process of getting this set up. But it's not obvious.
I'm pretty close to a really good setup here. I want to get some remote controls for the fans. Whether I do that through the plug or buy a whole new fan, that would suck. Hopefully I can just buy a remote control plug. Do they make that? I don't know. We'll find out. All right. Finally got all this figured out, I think. So to recap, if you're using a Mac, you definitely want to turn off the Bluetooth for your laptop. And then just use the ANT+ from the Magnus Trainer to communicate with your laptop. With the ANT+ dongle, that will allow your heart rate to work and the trainer to transmit through ANT+ to get to Zwift. In order to calibrate your Magnus Trainer, you need to download a third-party app called Ruby and pair that up. That will only work through your mobile Apple device like iPad or iPhone. Once you get that done, you'll connect that to that mobile app, and then you should be able to calibrate your unit. It's suggested that you let your unit warm up first. There is a hot and a cold calibration method. Not really sure totally what the difference there is, but it exists. Okay, so the big things that frustrated me today were trying to stick with Bluetooth, though looking back on it now, I don't really know why I was so set on Bluetooth, I guess. Don't really need to do anything with your Garmin. Probably don't even need a Garmin. I'm using it today just so I can control the camera, because I use a Garmin Verb. And I think that's it. There's definitely a difference between the Smart Trainer versus a non-Smart Trainer. I guess my rollers, when I was on the rollers, the way that I would adjust when we hit a hill is the other riders would, I'd have to kind of calibrate everything off the other riders in order to stay with them. So that is gone now. I imagine my Zwifting is going to be much more difficult, which I guess is good. Cool.